If you're a post-traumatic person and you're feeling triggered or confused by the Therapy Jeff controversy, this may be why. Hi, I'm Dr. Robin Koslowitz. I'm a clinical psychologist, PTSD and CPTSD expert, and author of Post-Traumatic Parenting. Here's my understanding and my timeline of the Therapy Jeff situation. First of all, let's start with Therapy Jeff making his Instagram into a safe space for people, into a space where people feel safe, supported, understood, and then they let their guard down. He then posts an explicit how to turn me on. I don't want to get into too much details because of triggers, but how to turn me on post that seems more appropriate for his private profiles or his Tinder than it does for his professional profiles, because people who are recovering from traumatic experiences, people who are on his page to learn more psychological awareness, are not expecting that. So that already feels like somewhat of an assault, because it feels like, I thought this was a safe place, I thought I could let my guard down, and you're sending me all these safety signals, and then you're suddenly not so safe. And if you are a post-traumatic parent or a post-traumatic person and you were raised in a home where your parents were confusing, where on the one hand they sent you safety signals, but on the other hand they really weren't safe, like maybe a parent who says, you can tell me anything, but then they go and tell your secrets to other people and it doesn't feel so safe, or a home where sometimes your parents are warm and kind and responsive, but not when the alcohol comes out, etc., then this is going to feel familiar to you, like someone who set themselves up as safe, who then wasn't safe. So are they safe? Are they not safe? Right? And that sense of confusion can really harm us because you did let your guard down, and that makes it a little bit worse. After that, what Therapy Jeff did, in my opinion, is posting about how he's just trying to help people who have intrusive thoughts about harming others. It seems to me, given that he's a licensed therapist, to be a deliberate conflation, which means a mixing together of two very different things. It's one thing to talk about people who chose to consume content about how to coerce and harm women. I'm purposely avoiding trigger words because heaven forbid that we say one of those trigger words, right? And we say a word because the algorithm will put it away, but apparently the content about how to harm women in this specific way, that's okay for the algorithm, but separate conversation, separate soapbox, right? So you post about that. Now that is an intentional choice. That's a man saying, let me be unsafe and be harmful in this way, and let me consume content that teaches me how. That is very different from what he was claiming to then be talking about, which is harm OCD, where you are afraid that you might harm someone else. And these are what we call ego dystonic, or unpleasant thoughts of maybe harming somebody else. And therefore you have all these compulsions to stop yourself from doing that. So I actually treat harm OCD, and people with those kind of intrusive thoughts will do anything they can, rather than seeking out content that's like how to harm other humans. They will take extreme measures to never find that content. So if that content shows up across their feed, they might be afraid, what if the algorithm is figuring something out about me? I need to burn my phone. I need to keep my phone in a locked box lest I accidentally ever access this content. I need to go confess to my wife that I had this thought, right? I need to, like, there's all these measures that they're going to take. That's the compulsive part of OCD, of the obsessive compulsive disorder. They would never be intentionally consuming this kind of content. And I kind of feel like Therapy Jeff knows that, because he went supposedly to graduate school. I think he calls himself LPC, so he should be a licensed professional counselor. That's a master's degree. He was probably taught about OCD in graduate school. He was probably taught about the first line treatment for it, which is exposure and response prevention. So that conflation of two things, intentionally consuming content about how to harm other humans versus having intrusive ego dystonic, which means unpleasant thoughts about harming other humans, mixing those two together, that kind of feels like gaslighting. So for those of us who are already with a trauma background and who are recovering from having been gaslighted, that just feels a little intentional, because you got to know the difference, right? Then I think the third part that people are uncomfortable with is Therapy Jeff posted an apology. And that's fine. But again, he says that he's somebody who helps couples and helps with relationship dynamics and helps with dating. I don't know about couples, but he definitely says he helps with dating and dating dynamics, right? So if you're working with people who are starting or maintaining relationships, one of the things you often teach them is how to apologize, right? That's something we do in relationships when we've transgressed. The way an apology works is if you truly believe that you have caused harm. Someone says, you did something to me and it harmed me. And you think about it and you're like, yeah, that was harmful. I shouldn't have done that. If a mom yells at her kids and she doesn't believe in yelling at kids, and the kid says, you yelled at me, that hurt my feelings. And the mom says, I actually don't believe in yelling at kids. So now I'm going to apologize and also take steps to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. That's what a sincere apology is, right? So if husband is making demeaning comments to his wife and his wife says, those comments really hurt my feelings. The husband's like, I was just being funny. I was joking. It was at a dinner party. It was social chit chat. And the wife said, no, but that comment that really hurt my feelings because it felt like I was being attacked. And the husband thinks it over and says, oh yeah, I can see why it would look that way to you. From now on, if I ever start making jokes like that, let's have a code word or let's have a system to make sure I don't do that, with the understanding that I might make a mistake, right? And the wife can be the one who did that, and then it would be the same conversation. That's what an apology is. It's, I was wrong, this wasn't consistent with my values, I will now stop doing it, and I will take reparative action to fix the hurt that I caused. So when you apologize, you're saying this action was not consistent with my values. Therapy Jeff apologized in a video on Instagram, but he left that and he took down that content from Instagram because on Instagram and on Threads, he was somewhat held accountable for it. Maybe he even felt attacked, but he left it up on TikTok. Now, there are people who are alleging that he left it up on TikTok. Dr. Inna is one of them, someone I think highly of. And, he left it up on TikTok because it's monetized on TikTok. So I don't know how I'm not on TikTok. So, I'm vaguely on TikTok, but I don't actually actively post content there. I don't spend a lot of time on TikTok, so I don't know how the monetization and all that stuff works. That's not my journey on social media. But he left that video up on TikTok. So if that's the case, then is this consistent with your values or inconsistent with your values? Because if it's inconsistent with your values, which is what an apology means, then you would take it down everywhere. And that's not an oversight because TikTok seems to be his main platform based on some research that I've done. So he knows that he didn't take it down from TikTok. That does seem like a choice. So that may be why you're feeling so triggered, because you may have gotten some insincere, inconsistent apologies in your life. So this feels like an insincere, inconsistent apology. This doesn't feel like I did wrong. This is inconsistent with my values. I am committing to change and I am committing to fix the harm that I caused. This seems to be all right, I'm being held accountable, so I'll do what like a little fifth grader might do when, you say sorry, and they're like, sorry, but they're not actually sorry. So that may be why you're feeling triggered right now from the whole Therapy Jeff controversy. Don't know Therapy Jeff, don't have any personal interactions with him, just want to explain the impact of a situation like this on someone who has experienced trauma in their life. This Thursday night, I think we will go live and we will discuss this more at the Therapy Thoughts Thursday. So let's continue this conversation, and I'd love to hear what all of you think in the comments. So comment below.